Hello, and I would like to welcome everyone to another episode of our Spotlight, or Africa 2060 Spotlight. And we have a special guest straight from Nigeria. And you have to pronounce your last name for me. It's Marita
Abdul.
Abdul. Okay, I thought I was about to mess it up.
No, no. I mess it up sometimes too. It's my husband's last name, so.
Gotcha. No, it's all good. So Marita, just if you could start off by just telling us a little bit about you, your family, where you currently live, all that kind of good stuff.
Sure. Well, I'm Nigerian American, so my family immigrated to Maryland when I was 10 years old, and I basically was a Maryland native. Stayed there my whole life. Went to college, went to law school in Maryland. Um, Took an African politics class in college, and I was like, whoa, mind blown.
Mm-hmm.
I'd left Nigeria in a colonial mentality, like
Mm-hmm.
we were ruled by the military. It was
Mm-hmm.
tear gas, and it was
Mm.
protests, and it was very British rule.
Sure.
You can't speak your language. You've
Wow.
got to speak English. You've got to have this, no native names, Catholic names, and all of this stuff. When I left,
Wow.
and I didn't know the history. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know the
Mm-hmm.
concept of race or anything at the same time. And then getting to America and being really getting into race, and then going back full circle to where it started and understanding the history of Africa, it really just blew my mind.
Wow.
And it
Wow.
really cemented for me what I wanted to do, which was international development.
Mm-hmm.
So I, went to law school, and I focused on international law. I knew I wanted to move to back to Africa, West Africa. I wasn't sure if it was Nigeria. I mean, my family was from there, but at the time, my whole family was, in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but by towards the end of law school, I pretty much knew I was going to Nigeria.
Got it.
You
Mm-hmm.
actually know, you might know someone related to my
I
reason that I moved back.
I do. I
My
do.
brother-in-law.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. So my brother-in-law is American,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, you met him,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided to relocate to America about a year and a half before I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, to Nigeria,
Nigeria. Sure.
and I wound up visiting
Mm-hmm.
him, and a year later, and he's picking me up from the airport, and he's like, hey, what's up, let me take you around to
Wow.
Abuja, the
Wow.
capital. And I'm like, oh, I visited, as a kid, with,
Mm-hmm.
just like from the viewpoint of
Mm-hmm.
my family, sitting in the house,
Mm-hmm.
family visiting and eating and like leaving, but I'd never explored
Sure.
as an adult. And so that really opened my eyes up to just the possibility of living there as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
and just if he could do it, I could do it too, for sure.
Absolutely.
So after law school, I actually just decided to come to law school in Nigeria,
Oh wow. Okay.
which I did for a year.
Okay.
It's if you've had a law degree, you just do a year in law school here, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're also a lawyer here.
Wow. Okay.
So that really, really helped, to acclimatize me back to uh, to to living in Nigeria and living in Lagos, which is where I am now. So I, went to law school here, and then I met my husband while I was in law school here, and that kind of
Nice.
further cemented me here. I worked for a corporate. I worked for a corporate. I worked in corporate law right after law school.
Mm-hmm.
One of the perks of having a foreign education is you have way more skills that are needed,
Sure.
and so
Sure.
it's very easy for me to climb the ladder much quicker.
Wow.
And so I
Good.
was able to get a job very quickly as corporate counsel for an international microfinance bank.
Wow.
So I did that for a year. I was very impressed with, just the level of technology and everything in the bank. I kind of was like, whoa.
Hmm.
trying to catch up with the technology.
Sure.
So I worked for them for a little bit, and then I actually did immigration law
Hmm.
in school, and so I found a lot, and I worked with USCIS before law
Hmm.
school. So I found a lot of people asking me about immigration while I worked in the bank.
Sure. Sure.
So I decided that there was definitely a need for bridging that gap, and so I started my own immigration consulting
Oh, wow.
firm. Yes, started that. It's been about 6 years now.
Okay.
Started that, focused on U.S. immigration, and started also focusing on Nigerian immigration and learning more about Nigerian immigration and work visas and all of that. So
So
that's on one side.
tell me a little bit more
Yeah.
about that. So if you were to encounter Americans, African Americans or otherwise, who wanted to, potentially retire or relocate, is that a service that you provide, or walk me through that a little bit of what you do?
I mean, it's not as popular yet here, but I have in the last 2 years been encountering not necessarily African Americans, but just foreigners
Hmm.
who, by virtue of marriage or just business wise, they found themselves here and they want to extend their visas, or they
Sure.
want to stay, or they want to purchase property and all of that.
Hmm.
So, luckily in my line, I meet a lot of, immigration officials, and I've been making the right contacts to
Sure.
try to get. So basically, what you have in Nigeria, what most foreigners work with, is what we call a SERPAC. It's a work permit. It's a 1 year work permit. It's something I can definitely provide.
Hmm.
Yes,
Hmm.
I'm gonna say that. Put that plug in for
Sure.
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 So that's good to know.
Hmm.
And then extending it is just it's very straightforward once you use a firm like myself who can just get that sped up for you. Other people who want to then say, like my brother-in-law who's wants to be here, for a
Hmm.
longer time,
Hmm.
can then get the longer surpack. So, 10 years, 5 years.
Got it.
That's a little bit harder to get because you have to get federal approval,
Hmm.
but it is something that's definitely done. And then after which you can then become a citizen. It's very interesting. The immigration here was is harder, and it is for people to become Nigerians, and it is for people to become Americans. I
Hmm.
think you have
Hmm.
to be here for at least 15 years. You really
Okay.
have to prove yourself. You have to stand in front of a panel, and you have to show that you've been a good citizen and all
Oh,
of this.
wow.
The reason that it was done that way was to prevent. It was actually to stop colonialism. So they were trying in the
Sure.
70s to prevent to try to keep things with Africa for the Africans,
Sure.
and stop the encroachment of Europeans and all of that. And I think you can see that in Ghana and Nigeria that has helped in terms of keeping jobs local, keeping wealth,
Hmm.
building Black wealth and building
Hmm.
African wealth.
Hmm.
But it's not caught up with the times now, which is people are intermarrying and
Hmm.
and all of that.
Sure.
So that's something that I'm pushing for. That's something I'm very passionate about. Is that I'm pushing for ancestral citizenship.
Hmm.
That's something that I'm very glad to be able to have a group of people like this platform, so I can actually carry that to the on the governmental level, on the federal level, and say, hey, we have this group of people who have proven their ancestry. We should be able to do something for them.
Got it.
So yeah.
That's great. That's a lot. And before we before we end, hopefully you don't mind me placing in a link some contact information, either a website, email, something, because there are a lot of people who are part of Africa 2063 who are interested in some of the things that you talked about. Relocating for whatever reason. To Nigeria. Now, speaking of that, in regards to as I talk to folks on the continent, they really advise to have a more entrepreneurial spirit when considering relocation. Our mutual friend, or actually your brother-in-law, my friend, who actually he was my college or my high school coach's son. Trevor's about 6 years younger than me.
uh,
So when I was a senior in high
uh,
school, he was probably in the sixth or seventh grade. So last time I
Gosh.
actually saw Trevor, he was a little guy, right? He's a grown man now, right? He's
Wow.
grown, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
but but like Trevor, right? Wanting to move to the continent or move to the country. So, can you talk about opportunities as you see them, or what's your experience been for Americans who want to move, whether to be employed like Trevor? I think he's an engineer, civil engineer. I'm not sure exactly what he does, or to become an entrepreneur. What have you seen? What is your experience? And what's your advice?
Okay, well, first of all, yes, I am an entrepreneur at heart. In addition to this, I own a two mini marts. You
Oh,
want to call it
nice.
like I do that, have that. My husband and I started a real estate development company as well about 6 years ago, and he's also very, schooled in the U.S., very passionate about infrastructural development. So we have a lot of land in Nigeria that's
Nice.
just, land. And so, usually when you have a community in America, you'll have, the roads paved, and then you'll have a school,
And and and,
residential
and
housing,
quick
hospital, and all
question.
of
Your
that.
husband was born and raised in Nigeria, correct?
Born and raised in
Got it.
Nigeria,
Okay. I'm sorry
yes,
to interrupt. I'm
yes.
sorry. Go
But
ahead.
he went to school.
Got it.
He studied construction in the U.S.
Got it.
So just to kind of round up, we've definitely done a lot of business in Nigeria, and I
Nice.
have to say we've been pretty successful.
Nice.
The reason is that Nigeria has 202 plus, who's counting, million people.
Yes. A
And
lot of people.
so just business wise, just Lagos alone has 25 million people. If you have a product that hits 5 million of these people, you're good. So business wise, you definitely, if you're a business person, you're thinking numbers, Nigeria is just, you know, for example, this COVID period, I'm selling essentials. I've got a
Mm-hmm.
mini mart. It's just people going in and out.
Mm-hmm.
There's just tons of people in Lagos. It's like New York on,
Steroids.
on ecstasy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So entrepreneurial spirit is this is a place to explore it because of just the sheer number of people, our consumerist nature, where Lagos especially, there's nightlife there, people love life, they love to spend, there's wealth here, this is where the 1% live. And so if you have an idea, and we love flashy things,
Mm-hmm.
and we love gadgets and technology and all of that, so this is a place for that. One thing I would say is planning wise, right? If you want to, do, how would you start?
Mm-hmm.
For me, I came in and I worked, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to just have that experience and know how it is working with Nigerians, and working, what's the working environment like, and make those connections,
Sure.
just have some connections within that industry. Another thing I did was that I worked for US based companies remotely, part
Mm-hmm.
time, to
Mm-hmm.
give me stable income
Mm-hmm.
in dollars. And that enabled me to have flexibility to also run my own business
Mm-hmm.
while just having a baseline income in order to cover my expenses. The good thing about Nigeria is that your month to month expenses are cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
I actually, did a little calculation in my head, and rent in a nice area, for example, where I live right now is an estate, we call it. It's a, multi-unit housing.
Mm-hmm.
It's gated.
Mm-hmm.
It's 24-hour power, which means that while the government does not provide 24-hour power, the estate runs, you buy your electricity units, so you buy a certain amount, and then it figures out how it's going to provide the 24-hour power for you.
Mm.
So for example, if you do see the power cut out, which is the government's power, maybe there'll be a 3 minutes interval where they change over,
Sure.
they'll cut to their own power. And so that way you're able to get 24-hour power.
Got it.
Now, somewhere like this, a 4 bedroom structure is just $6,000 a year. And it's huge. I mean,
Wow.
it's got like a, a extra room in the back if you wanted to have like a staff or someone, that a maid or nanny or whatever. Um,
Nice.
maids labor is much cheaper. So I have a driver. I'm just a
Yeah.
terrible driver. And also I don't want to drive in Lagos.
And Nigeria,
I
and they drive on the opposite side of the United States, correct? Because they were British.
no, they drive on the same
Oh, same
side, but
side. Okay.
it's crazy. And so I just have a driver, and for example, a driver is about maybe $200 a month.
Okay.
And so
And
and that's a
what
really
about your
good
maid
salary.
your maid service? How much is that approximately for those who want to know?
Service, a good maid is definitely at least maybe they're about maybe $150, $100 a month live in.
Oh wow.
And so if yes, and so
Wow.
that allows you as a family person to be able to have your home taken care of so you can run your business more effectively.
I'm ready to get
Yeah.
that right now. Because
Yeah,
my
I was like, I'm going to give you some prices because,
man, I tell you
people
what,
want to know the prices. So you got, yeah,
absolutely.
but the thing is, you have to pay your rent
Sure.
up front for a year.
Hmm.
You might have heard that
Yes, I
before. So
have.
you have to have the bulk cash.
Hmm. Hmm.
You get maybe ship your car over.
Hmm.
Once you have that, I always recommend to people that do not move to Africa for anything less than $1,500 to $2,000 a month. The reason is that, which is still not, which is great,
Hmm.
the reason even to get to that amount, which is high here, is because we Americans love our cheese and our strawberries
Hmm.
and organic products, and
Hmm.
we might want to eat out. That's like an American thing. We want to go to
Sure.
restaurants, and that, and so that might eat into your finances. But apart from that, if you're eating like local grub, rice, grains and sauces and stuff like that, it's super cheap. I mean, my
Mm.
monthly groceries for my
Hmm.
household of 6 people is uh probably about $200
What?
a month. Yeah, that's no,
Okay.
actually no. I'm trying to. That's about right because
Wow.
it's about 460 now to a dollar. So
Wow.
imagine if you were able to earn dollars while you were living here, it would go a lot further. So
Exactly.
that's why I say if you can hold on to a job that's earning you some sort of dollar amount per month that's stable,
Hmm.
and that'll get you through, your basics, your bills, your utilities. That way you can then have time, if you are able to hire staff to run your household and help you clean and stuff, you can run your business and try to figure out the terrain, which is a little trickier.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because of COVID, I know a lot of employers are more open to remote, right? So, I'm in North Carolina, I could be in Lagos right now, and not only would my company wouldn't they wouldn't know, they wouldn't care. They're like, as long as you're showing up during Eastern
Yes,
Standard
I
Time to
I
work.
worked remotely. I worked remotely for 2 years from Lagos for a
How
company in San Diego. I stopped
the
because of the
hours were late?
time.
The
It was
hours were late
just,
for you, right?
yeah, I was working till midnight sometimes, and I
Hmm.
would start work at like 3 in the afternoon.
Right, right.
But it was part time, so it was great,
Hmm.
but it was just tiring at some point. But it was really good.
We're talking about working. Let's talk a little bit about healthcare, right? Compared to what you were paying in the States, what you're paying now, the whole healthcare system. Could you break that down for us, if you don't mind?
Okay, so healthcare. Um, I know Ghana has a national program. Nigeria probably does, but I'm not sure it's probably to the standard of what, as what Ghana has. And so a lot of people do private insurance.
Hmm.
Our state government is a lot stronger. Like our state governments kind of like do their own thing, and we don't have that strong national government for health insurance. So you can get private health insurance. I don't have health insurance, for example, but medical care is much cheaper here
Hmm.
than Nigeria. So it depends on what than America. It depends on
Hmm.
what your medical needs are. Most of the things that we battle here in Nigeria for an average person who has no health issues is malaria,
Mm.
and that's pretty cheap to treat. I just treated my malaria, and I spent It was a pretty bad case. I
Wow.
mean, I was in a hospital. I
Wow.
spent
Sorry to hear
4 days in the
that.
hospital, and
Ooh.
my total, I mean, shots and all of this, and I probably spent maybe $800 for a 4 day stay in the
That that
hospital. You
that is
know?
pretty. That's
Yeah.
pretty good price. Just really to compare. So I had had to go. My first trip to the to the emergency room in my life was about 2 or 3 months ago. At age 50, I finally made it to the emergency room for the first time. I had no idea how it went, how these things go. I had a kidney stone issue in the middle of the night. I got right. So I go. It was about a 2.5 hour visit. They go. They do whatever. They give you something to treat it and blah blah blah, and they send you on your way. Um, so my insurance took care of most of it, but it was a $12,000 medical bill that 9,000 my insurance took care of, and I was responsible for $3,000 for about a 2.5, 3 hour visit to the hospital, right? And I'm thinking like, dang, it's like that. I need to stay in better shape, but I made it 50 years without ever having to go to the. So yeah. So I get excited when I hear about a 4 day stay for $800. You can't get much better than that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
It's for a relatively healthy person, it's fine. I think if you have a chronic issue, then what most Americans do is, their yearly visit back to America,
right.
then they purchase some sort of private insurance for that and
Sure.
then get their checkups done. But we have pretty good care here as well.
Good.
It's just the more chronic it is, or the more like surgery and that sort of stuff, the more expensive it will be, but still not as expensive as the United States.
Got it. Let's talk about safety, right? You hear about the various cities and crime. Maybe you could talk about how safe you feel and crime and things like that where you are.
Yeah, Nigeria has a pretty bad rep for security. Most people go, "Oh, Boko Haram," So I want to clear that up. There, Boko Haram is very it's very controlled in the northern region.
And for those who don't know, can
Most
can you give maybe a 30-second on who they
30
are,
second,
what they did in the
yes.
past? Like I think I know, but maybe
Okay,
I'd
they're
love to
a
hear from you.
terrorist group
Hmm.
who have done a lot of bombings and stuff against Christians and all of
Hmm.
this, and they're pretty extremist.
Right.
And so, but they're pretty controlled to the northern region. Most Americans don't tend to go there for obvious reasons. Most Americans stay in 3 or 4 cities. Abuja is probably the closest to America. It's very planned. It's very chill. It's very suburban. It's got its nice life, but it's very chill. And then you got Lagos, which is like the business hub. That's where you want to go. Abuja is more for government. It's like DC. Lagos tends to have a Miami mixed with New York feel because it's coastal. So it's got the palm trees and the beaches, but it's
Hmm.
very business-like at the same time. It's got the most amount of people, and it's got 25 million people in one city, and it's that's so very safe. Those regions, Abuja, Lagos, Port Harcourt is another one. It's oil region. That's where like most of the oil and the expats. So that's another place thing you want to try is if you want to come into Nigeria as an expatriate. Usually they go there, and then we have a couple other cities I can't remember, Benin and some others. Safety for Lagos is for where you're going to stay as an American, most likely it's pretty safe. There's
Hmm.
like, security everywhere. I've never felt, anything less safe than being in East Baltimore, which is where, I went to school.
Right. Right.
In some situation at night, you're like, I shouldn't be here, maybe something like that, but nothing crazy. No, it's come a long way. There used to be like armed wave robberies and stuff like that in the past, maybe 9, 10 years ago, but
Hmm.
nothing like that now, especially for Lagos. Lagos has become an international city, and it's very metropolitan. There's a lot of different mixes of people, so the state government knows better, so they're very
Got
very into this the security.
got it. That's good to know. And I know a lot of folks know a lot of, especially a lot of the single ladies, really are big on security and feeling safe. A few more questions, man. This 30 minutes went quick. We're like down to like the last 7 minutes. This is crazy. I keep you on the phone for like another 5, 6 hours. Um,
I know.
Technology. So maybe you talked a little bit about the infrastructure, electricity, and things of that sort. Maybe can you talk about your internet connection? I'm assuming because we're having this conversation, your internet is readily available. Maybe you can talk about the availability of high speed internet and all those kind of amenities that we're used to here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, so we have fiber optic broadband. We do have that. You can cable, but it depends on where you are. So, for example, my estate does not allow that. So I was never able to get the fiber optic, connected cable. It would give me the American experience. But it is here. We have American Express here. We have Domino's. We have international companies here, and that's what they use. We have Shell and all of that. But if you're just a small business, you're most likely going to either be able to fiber cable to your office if
Hmm.
it's available, or you'll have to purchase a broadband modem, which is what people tend to use. I wish I could show you mine. It's just like
Sure.
the router.
And the cost is about the
um,
same. Is it here in the States for
it's
monthly internet?
so for unlimited, high speed, you probably want to do between 10 and 20,000 naira, which is between $50 and $80. Or I hope I'm doing that. That's probably not right. It's probably between 21 and $80. So
Got
depending
it.
on
Which package you
how you
select?
want to boost it or whatever.
Got it. Got it.
You do want to have more than one. So we do have downtimes where, especially in the rainy season, where
Mm,
it's just not working for some reason.
wow.
So most people want to switch over to, have a second one that's like cheaper, and that'll usually work. So like a smaller one that you can just carry around with you. We have those.
Wow.
So
Okay.
that's another. I've never seen that in America actually. You just have like your internet thing. It's this small, and you
Really?
can load whatever you want on it, and you can carry it around, in
It's
your
a
car and your
high speed connection.
high
Wow.
speed. Yes,
Wow. That's
yeah.
interesting.
So
Okay.
you can carry it from place to place. So I have that as well. And but for the most part, usually when you want to get a router and you go to the place, they'll ask you where you live, they'll come check it out, and they'll tell you
Hmm.
which service will be best for your area.
Sure.
But that's about what it costs.
That's good to know. Final two questions for you. Considering you were, raised here in the States and, going back, what was the toughest part of that transition, kind of moving back home?
My experience was slightly different because I went straight to law school in Nigeria.
Right,
So
right, right.
it was in a village out, like a town village outside of Abuja. And so I had to stay there. I had to like fetch water from, the local stream. And I mean, at the same time, it's attend lectures, where the teacher was yelling and I could barely hear anything. So it was culture shock for the school part.
Wow.
But what I would say was the most interesting thing, and most things people will notice when you first get to Africa or like haven't been in a while, is the juxtaposition of like modern versus like, not modern. So you'll see, KFC, and you're like, oh, can I get, cheese, whatever they sell,
Two piece.
a bucket
Yeah,
and
right.
this, a two piece
And a
and this and that.
biscuit.
And you're like, okay, drive around, and then you do your drive through, and then, you'll drive around another street, and it's like, you won't see huts, but you'll see more of like something that looks like maybe it belongs in maybe the 50s or something,
Sure, sure.
or maybe like, post-war Russia. You're
Wow.
kind of like,
Okay.
okay, so that's I mean that's why they call it a developing country. We have pockets where it's like, okay, am I in Dubai or something? And then there's pockets where you know I mean, it's not like I didn't expect it, but it's just
Sure,
weird to see because you're kind
sure.
of in your zone in America, and you really have to travel somewhere far to get to a different kind of environment. So that was kind of the toughest thing for me.
Hmm.
um Apart from that was just uh, maybe just the culture. It's
Hmm.
weird. I'm
Sure.
Nigerian, but I'm very friendly. I'm like, hey, what's up? They're very friendly too, but not as friendly as American. And that's just even in other countries too. We
Mm-hmm.
tend to just be like, hey, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
And, even Europeans are like, whoa. So
Right.
just little things like that. But Nigerians love to help foreigners. That's something they'll be like, oh, come to my house and you have to try this. And we're very hospitable people, and
Mm-hmm.
they want to, make sure you're good, make sure you're comfortable. So it's been a good experience. I love it. I love the
Nice.
organic food. I love so many things about it.
Nice, nice. And one final question for for those who are thinking about making that move, whether retirement or just relocating, start a business, all the above. What is, I guess, based on, I guess this question can be answered differently based on the scenario, but what is the best way that, in general, someone could prepare right now? What should they be doing right now to prepare for life in Lagos or life somewhere else in Nigeria?
Wow, that's a hard question to answer in
It's
such a
very
short time.
broad.
Let me
It's
try.
it's, it's so broad though.
Right. Um, well, first you would want to narrow what exactly you want to do to sustain yourself. Do you want to find a job, as an expatriate, as a foreigner, service in Nigeria, or do you have capital enough to set up something? If
Hmm.
you're finding a job, it's easier because if you do get a job, then it's like, okay, I'm in it. Then you can find housing and everything else, just like when you move wherever else in the world or in this into a different town. But for entrepreneurs, it's definitely a different thing. What I would do, what I did was you would want to talk to local people. You need to find a network of people in that industry that
Hmm.
understand the industry. You'd want to ask questions, and then you definitely want to come, of course, and survey. I think it's not enough to do like one visit and then you're like, oh, I'm good to go. You have to understand the terrain and understand how much exactly you need to run this business for a
Hmm.
year, before you break it even or whatever
Hmm.
you're expecting.
Hmm.
And you need to have that ready. If you need to lease a space, you need to work with the locals. You need to work with either locals or people who are on ground who can help you do that. Nigerians who live abroad do business in Nigeria with the help of their network without even being here. So they have people who help them with that. And by the time they then decide to transition and move here, it's easier because they've been visiting, they've been observing. The third one I want to say is partnership. So that's a great way to kind of get your feet wet, but you're also observing. So you want to partner with someone who already knows the ropes, that is trusted, and that you can then use that as an opportunity to visit a couple times and work on projects together.
Got it. And for I know we're just about out of time, but a little quick follow up. We talked about the entrepreneurial piece, and you mentioned a little bit about potentially those who want to potentially seek a job and work in Nigeria. Are there specific industries that are more likely to hire native English speakers, Americans, than other industries? Do you have any advice for folks from that perspective as far as job hunting based on your skills as an English speaker, Native American, not Native
Um,
American, but you know what I mean? Sure.
right. Um, well, there are international companies, for example, the UN in Abuja, Shell. We have a lot of oil
Mm-hmm.
here. So
Mm-hmm.
this is an oil rich place. We've got
Sure.
Shell, Chevron. Those are places that tend to hire people with, petroleum oil type, and not just that, HR,
Sure.
and other
Sure.
positions they need filled for that. A lot of tech. This is like the tech
Mm-hmm.
place of Africa, I've heard, and Kenya is as well. But
Mm-hmm.
this is really a lot of young tech stuff going on here. Um, so I know there's a lot of opportunity for that here. Apart from that, I mean, Nigerians also are always looking for expats, so a Nigerian business, but they need foreign expertise. That would also be in education. So when they're starting up an international school, they always need international teachers or
Sure.
people who have run international schools before. And so that's also a big one because we really pay, Nigerians pay for quality education, and
Hmm.
most of the education is private here. And
Hmm.
so we're willing to shell out a lot of money to make sure that they're getting a world-class education. So those are the ones I can think of: education, oil, tech for sure,
Definitely.
HR,
Got it. Well, I think we're just about out of time. This
real
has been,
estate.
instead of real estate.
Yes.
Nice. And those are excellent, excellent, excellent. This is great information. So we're just about out of time. Is there anything that you want to leave us with? Maybe some parting words of wisdom?
Sure. I think the biggest thing, if you're trying to think and make the leap, or okay, you can't completely make up your mind without visiting for the first time. That's
Sure.
the first thing I wanted to really impart on people is just visit. Once you visited, anywhere really, you're more convinced, or you're more comfortable with
Hmm.
what it is that you're trying to do. So I wouldn't put so much pressure on, what you want to do in the future, but I would just say, okay, let me just take a look and get to know people, and then of course have a planned list of questions or whatever it is you're trying to fulfill during your visit. So
Excellent, excellent. So Marita, so thank you for blessing us with all this great information. I'm going to, in the comments, I'm going to leave your contact information for those who want to know a little bit more about immigration. Maybe that's something that we can be your client down the line. We would love to support your business in that regards. With that, we're going to end it, but don't hang up because I still want to talk to you. But for everybody else, see you later.
sure.
All right. But thank you. We really appreciate you.